She will find out you have moved on in the most ordinary way possible. A mutual friend's story, a photo that was not meant for her, or a silence on her end that used to get filled and suddenly does not anymore. There will be no warning, no dramatic scene, just one quiet moment where she checks for you out of old habit, expecting the familiar shape of your attention waiting in the background, and finds nothing there instead. Not anger, not a message left on read. Nothing. That absence lands harder than any fight ever could have, because a part of her spent months assuming you would always be somewhere close enough to return to eventually. Here is what almost nobody explains about that exact moment. What she fears in it is rarely losing you. By the middle of this video, you will know precisely what she is actually afraid of and why it has almost nothing to do with missing you the way you might expect. I know this fear because I watched it happen from both sides. The side that finally moved on, and years earlier, the side still waiting for someone to notice I had not. Once you understand what actually triggers underneath an avoidant woman, when she senses you are truly gone, you stop needing her reaction to mean what you assumed it would mean. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what surfaces in her, why it surfaces then and not sooner, and what it does and does not prove about how she felt about you. Here is what catches most people off guard about this moment. You expect her fear, if it exists at all, to look like heartbreak. It rarely does. It looks smaller than that, quieter, closer to disorientation than grief. Because what breaks is not a fantasy about the two of you together. What breaks is a much older assumption she carried without realizing she was carrying it. You have probably imagined her reaction to your absence more than once already. Maybe you pictured her devastated, finally understanding what she lost the moment it became irreversible. Maybe you picture her unaffected entirely, moving through her life exactly as she always intended to, untouched by any of it. Maybe, if you're honest, what you actually picture is something in between, a flicker of something real followed quickly by her burying it the way she has buried everything else that felt too large to sit with. But here's the part almost nobody explains about what she actually fears once she registers that you are gone for good. What she is afraid of losing and what you assume she is afraid of losing are rarely the same thing. If that sounds like it is building toward the idea that she is secretly panicking and about to come running back, stay with me, because that is not where this goes. This is not a video promising she will realize her mistake and return. This is about the actual psychological mechanism that activates in her. So you understand what you are dealing with instead of projecting a movie ending onto a moment that rarely produces one. To be clear, this is not a video telling you her fear proves she loved you more than she showed, or that it means nothing at all either. This is about naming the specific thing underneath her reaction, because it explains far more about her than it does about you. Let us get into it. The first thing to understand is that her deepest fear once she realizes you have moved on is rarely the loss of you specifically. It is the loss of the option of you. For as long as you are still available, even distantly, even after everything, some part of her nervous system quietly filed you away as a safety net, proof that closeness was still possible somewhere if she ever decided she wanted again. The moment that option disappears, what she loses is not a relationship she was actively choosing. She loses a psychological insurance policy she did not know she was relying on until it was gone. The second thing to understand is why this specific fear hits harder than almost anything that happened during the relationship itself. While you were together, her system had an escape route available at all times. Distance, silence, withdrawal, all of it reversible whenever she chose. Once you move on, that reversibility disappears. And for someone whose entire relational pattern is built around maintaining control over how close anyone gets, losing the ability to reverse a decision is far more destabilizing than losing the relationship ever was while it was still hers to control. Here is where most people misread this reaction entirely, in one of two directions. Some assume any visible reaction from her, a longer look, a message out of nowhere, a mutual friend mentioning she asked about you, must mean she wants you back and is working up courage to say so. Others assume the opposite, deciding any reaction at all is fake or manipulative, an attempt to pull you back into her orbit now that she senses losing access to you. Neither read is usually accurate, because what she is reacting to is not you. It is a sudden loss of a fallback option, and that reaction can be completely real without meaning anything about wanting the relationship back specifically. Because here's what rarely gets said plainly enough. Her fear, once she realizes you've moved on, is less about you and more about what your absence confirms about her. That the pattern she has repeated with person after person eventually runs out of chances. That people do not, in fact, wait indefinitely, and that she may have just watched proof of that happen in real time. Picture what that confirmation actually does to her internally. For years, some quiet part of her operated on the belief that her withdrawal cost nothing permanent. That people came back. That space was always available to close again whenever she felt ready. Watching you actually move on forward is the first real evidence against that belief, and evidence like that does not stay contained to just your relationship. It bleeds into how she thinks about every future connection, planting a doubt that was not there before, that maybe the safety net she has always assumed exists is not guaranteed after all. There is also a second, quieter fear sitting underneath the first one, and it tends to surface later than the initial shock. Once she processes that you have genuinely moved on, what often follows is a colder kind of fear, not about you, but about herself, a fear that whatever caused to keep pushing you away in the first place is still fully intact and will do the exact same thing to whoever comes next. Losing you does not automatically teach her anything different. It simply confirms that the pattern is real, without necessarily giving her any tools to interrupt it the next time it starts running. This is where the difference between a healthy response and an unhealthy one becomes visible, though it rarely shows up immediately. An avoidant woman who genuinely does the work after this moment uses the fear as information, sits with the discomfort of watching someone finally stop waiting, and lets it motivate real internal change rather than a temporary emotional reaction aimed at getting you back specifically. That version is possible, but it takes real time and honest self-examination, and almost never happens in the same week she first notices you have moved on. What happens immediately is almost always the smaller, more reactive fear, not the deeper work. Here's a distinction worth sitting with directly, because it changes how you interpret anything she does after this point. A woman motivated by genuine reflection reaches out slowly, if she reaches out at all, and does so without urgency, often after real space, often taking full responsibility, without needing anything from you in return. A woman motivated purely by the fear of losing the fallback option reaches out quickly, often within days of sensing you are truly gone, and the message tends to center more on her own discomfort than on anything about you specifically. Learning to notice which one you are looking at protects you from mistaking urgency for growth, which brings up the real question worth asking here. Not, does this mean she still loves me? But what is this fear actually telling her about herself, and will she let it teach her anything? Because the fear itself proves very little on its own. It is simply the first crack in an old assumption, and what she does with that crack over the following months is the part that actually determines whether anything about her pattern changes for you or for the next person after you. Here is what matters most if you are the one she is only now realizing she has lost. Her fear is not proof that you should have waited longer, and it is not proof that leaving was the wrong decision either. It is proof that your presence, even in its quiet, unclaimed form, was doing more work in her internal world than she ever acknowledged while she still had it. You did not owe her that safety net indefinitely. Moving on was not cruelty. It was simply the natural end of an arrangement that was only ever sustainable while you agreed to keep holding a door open that she was never fully willing to walk through. So there are two honest paths sitting ahead of you here, and neither one requires her fear to resolve into anything specific. If some part of you is watching for signs that her fear will turn into pursuit, the honest path is not slowing down your own life to leave room for that possibility. It is continuing forward exactly as you already started, letting whatever she does with her fear exist entirely separate from your own healing. If you have already fully released the outcome, the honest path is not needing closure on how she processes this to feel complete. It is trusting that her fear belongs to her now, the way your pain once belonged entirely to you, and that you do not owe her a role in resolving it just because you once played a role in creating it. Both paths are valid, and neither one requires you to stay standing in a doorway you have already walked out of, because the goal was never to make her afraid of losing you. The goal was to build a life solid enough that her fear, whenever it eventually arrived, simply confirmed what you already knew, that you were never the one who needed to be chased in the first place. And that is exactly where you are standing right now.